She was sent to the billionaire's suite, and he trembled when she said, "This is my first time." Before we explore all the details of this incredible story, tell us where you're following us from and the time. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing, and let's embark on this journey together. She knew she shouldn't have knocked on that door, but destiny doesn't ask for permission. The marble floors of the grandeur Manhattan Hotel gleamed under the crystal chandeliers, reflecting the hurried steps of guests who lived in a world Savannah Quinn could only observe from the sidelines. At 25, she had learned to move through luxury like a shadow, present but invisible, efficient but unnoticed, her reflection caught in the polished elevator doors as she ascended to the penthouse level. Dark skin that glowed under the warm lighting, eyes that held stories she'd never shared, and hands that trembled slightly as she balanced the sterling silver tray. The uniform fit her perfectly, but she wore it like armor against a world that had taught her to expect nothing and give everything. "Presidential suite," she whispered to herself, checking the room number again. In 3 years working at the hotel, she'd never been sent to deliver anything to the top floor. That was territory reserved for managers, for people who spoke the language of wealth and power. But tonight, everyone else was occupied with the Davidson wedding reception downstairs, and Mr. Hartwell had looked at her with those tired eyes that said he needed someone reliable, someone who wouldn't ask questions. The elevator's soft ding announced her arrival to the 42nd floor. The hallway stretched before her like something from a magazine, Persian rugs, oil paintings, and silence so profound it felt sacred. Her footsteps were muffled as she approached the double doors at the end of the corridor. She paused, adjusting the crystal glass of aged whiskey and the plate of what the chef had called midnight poetry, delicate appetizers arranged like art. Her heart drummed against her ribcage, not from nervousness about the delivery, but from something else. A strange feeling that this moment mattered more than she understood. Savannah raised her hand and knocked gently. 3 soft taps that seemed to echo in the expensive silence. Footsteps approached from inside, measured and deliberate. The door opened, and time stopped. Elijah March stood before her, and nothing could have prepared her for the weight of his presence. At 38, he carried himself with the confidence of a man who owned pieces of the world, but his eyes looked like they belonged to someone much older, much more tired. He wore a simple white dress shirt unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms that spoke of hidden strength. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his fingers through it. But it was the way he looked at her that made her breath catch, not with the dismissive glance she was used to, but with something that felt like recognition. "Mr. March?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I have your evening request." He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he studied her face with an intensity that should have made her uncomfortable, but somehow didn't. It felt like he was reading something written there that even she didn't know existed. "You're not Marcus," he said finally, his voice low and rougher than she'd expected. "No, sir. Marcus is handling the Davidson event downstairs. I'm Savannah Quinn from the evening service team." "Savannah." He repeated her name like he was testing how it felt on his tongue. "That's unexpected." She offered the tray, eager to complete the transaction and return to the familiar chaos of the lower floors. But as he reached for the whiskey, their fingers brushed for just a moment. The contact sent an electric current up her arm that she couldn't explain. Elijah stepped back, the glass trembling almost imperceptibly in his hand. "Would you—" He paused, and for a moment, the powerful billionaire looked like a lost child. "Would you mind staying for just a moment? I realize it's unconventional, but—" Savannah knew she should decline. Protocol was clear about interactions with guests, but something in his voice, not commanding or entitled but vulnerable, made her nod before her rational mind could object. "Just for a moment," she heard herself say. As she stepped into the suite, she was struck not by the obvious luxury, the panoramic view of Manhattan's glittering skyline, the furniture that probably cost more than she made in a year, but by how empty it felt, like a beautiful museum where no one actually lived. Elijah gestured toward the seating area near the floor-to-ceiling windows. "Please sit. I know this is unusual, but tonight has been difficult." Savannah perched on the edge of an ivory leather chair, her spine straight, ready to leave at any moment. "Is everything all right with your order, sir?" "It's perfect." He sat across from her, cradling the whiskey but not drinking it. "Tell me, Savannah, do you ever feel like you're living someone else's life?" The question caught her off guard. She'd expected small talk, perhaps a complaint about service, not philosophy from a man who seemed to have everything. She considered the question seriously. I think most people do sometimes. The trick is figuring out which parts are really yours. Elijah looked at her with something that might have been surprise. You speak like someone who's thought about that before. You learn to think about a lot of things when you're waiting tables at 3 a.m., wondering if the tips will cover your mother's medication. The words slipped out before she could stop them. Too personal, too real for this pristine space. But instead of the discomfort she expected, Elijah leaned forward slightly. Your mother is sick? Diabetes. The expensive kind. Savannah felt heat rise in her cheeks. I'm sorry, you didn't ask for my life story. Actually, he said quietly, I think I did. They sat in silence for a moment, the city lights painting shadows across their faces. Savannah found herself studying this man who could buy anything but seemed to need something money couldn't purchase. What about you? She asked, surprising herself with her boldness. Do you feel like you're living someone else's life? Elijah's laugh was hollow. Every single day. The irony is, it's supposed to be mine. Before either of them could say more, Savannah's phone buzzed with a text from her supervisor. The reminder snapped her back to reality. I should go, she said, standing quickly. Thank you for... This was unexpected. As she moved toward the door, Elijah's voice stopped her. Savannah? She turned back to find him standing as well, the whiskey still untouched in his hand. Tomorrow night, same time. Would you bring the evening service again? Her heart did something complicated in her chest. I'm not usually assigned to this floor, Mr. March. I'll request you specifically. The words hung between them like a promise neither fully understood. And as Savannah left that suite, she had no idea that a simple room service delivery had just changed the trajectory of 2 lives forever. If you were Savannah, would you have agreed to stay in that suite with an unknown billionaire? Sometimes, a single moment of courage can change our whole life. But is it worth the risk? Some invitations aren't just words. They're doorways to a life you never imagined. Savannah stared at her reflection in the employee locker room mirror, trying to make sense of what had happened the night before. 24 hours later, and she could still feel the weight of Elijah March's gaze, still hear the vulnerability in his voice when he'd asked her to stay. She'd barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw those tired, intelligent eyes studying her like she was a puzzle he desperately needed to solve. It should have felt invasive. Instead, it felt like being seen for the first time in her life. Girl, you look like you've seen a ghost. Keisha Washington, her closest friend at the hotel, appeared beside her, adjusting her own uniform. At 23, Keisha worked housekeeping and had a talent for reading people that bordered on supernatural. Just tired, Savannah mumbled, fumbling with her name tag. Keisha's dark eyes narrowed. This have anything to do with why Mr. Hartwell was looking for you specifically today? Man seemed nervous as a cat in a room full of rocking chairs. Before Savannah could respond, their supervisor appeared in the doorway. Richard Hartwell was a thin man in his 50s who'd worked at the Grandeur for 15 years and took pride in knowing every guest's preferences by heart. Today, however, he looked distinctly uncomfortable. Quinn, he called, his voice higher than usual. Need to see you. Now. Keisha shot Savannah a look that clearly said, I told you so, as Savannah followed Mr. Hartwell to his cramped office behind the concierge desk. Sit, he said, closing the door. The small space felt even smaller with tension filling it. I'm going to ask you a question and I need you to be completely honest. Did anything inappropriate happen last night with the guest in the presidential suite? Savannah's stomach dropped. No, sir. Nothing inappropriate. I delivered the order as requested. Because I got a call this morning. Hartwell rubbed his temples. A very specific call requesting that you and only you handle all room service for that suite for the remainder of the guest's stay. The words hit her like a physical blow. Elijah had actually done it. He'd requested her specifically. I don't understand the problem, sir, she managed to say. The problem, Quinn, is that presidential suite guests don't request specific staff members unless something significant happened. And this particular guest, Hartwell lowered his voice. This is Elijah March. The Elijah March. The man owns half the buildings in this city and has hotels in 12 countries. When he makes a request, it gets noticed. Savannah's mouth went dry. She'd known he was important, but the way Hartwell was acting suggested she'd stepped into something much bigger than a simple room service delivery. What did you two talk about? Hartwell asked. Nothing inappropriate, she repeated. He seemed lonely. We talked about work, about life. It was very respectful. Hartwell studied her for a long moment. You realize this could be a career-making opportunity or a career-ending disaster depending on how you handle it. I just want to do my job, sir. Good, because tonight you're going back up there. But Quinn, his voice took on a warning tone, remember who you are and where you come from. Men like Elijah March live in a different world. Don't get confused about which world you belong in. 3 hours later, Savannah found herself back in the elevator, ascending to the 42nd floor. This time she carried a dinner order, grilled salmon, asparagus, and a glass of the hotel's finest Bordeaux. Her hands were steadier now, but her heart raced for entirely different reasons. She knocked on the suite door with the same 3 gentle taps as the night before. This time, when Elijah opened the door, he was dressed more casually, dark jeans and a navy sweater that made his eyes look almost grey in the hallway lighting. But it was his expression that stopped her breath. Relief. As if he'd been genuinely worried she wouldn't come. Savannah. Her name on his lips sounded like a prayer answered. "Your dinner, Mr. March," she said, offering the tray with professional composure. "Please, come in." He stepped aside. "And it's Elijah. I think we're past formalities." As she entered the suite, she noticed small changes. A book lay open on the coffee table, something by James Baldwin. A laptop sat closed nearby, and papers were scattered across the dining table. The space looked lived in now, human. "You actually stayed," she said, setting the tray on the dining table. "You actually came back," he replied. "I wasn't sure you would. It's my job." "Is it?" He moved closer, but not invasively. "Be honest with me, Savannah. Are you here because your supervisor told you to be, or because some part of you wanted to see me again?" The question hung between them like a challenge. Savannah had always prided herself on honesty, but this felt dangerous. Admitting that she'd thought about him all day, that she'd wondered what it would be like to talk to him again, felt like stepping off a cliff. She paused, meeting his eyes. "I wanted to see if last night was real." "What do you mean?" "You talked to me like I mattered, like my thoughts were worth hearing. That doesn't happen often in my world." Elijah's expression softened. "In my world, people tell me what they think I want to hear. Last night, you told me what you actually thought. Do you have any idea how rare that is?" He gestured toward the seating area. "Will you stay again, just for a little while?" This time, Savannah didn't hesitate. She settled into the same chair as the night before, and Elijah took his place across from her. But tonight felt different, less accidental, more intentional. "Tell me about your mother," he said suddenly. "Why?" "Because when you mentioned her last night, your whole face changed. She's important to you." Savannah found herself talking about things she never shared with anyone, about her mother's diagnosis 5 years ago, about dropping out of community college to work full-time, about the constant juggling act of medications and medical bills, and trying to maintain hope when the numbers never seemed to add up. "She raised me alone," Savannah said, her voice soft with memory. "Never complained, never made me feel like a burden, even when things got really hard. She used to say that dignity isn't about how much money you have, it's about how you treat people when you don't have to. She sounds remarkable." "She is." Savannah looked up to find Elijah watching her with an intensity that made her self-conscious. "What about your family?" Something shifted in his expression, a wall going up. "My parents died when I was 12, car accident. I was raised by my grandfather." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. He was effective. He made sure I had everything I needed to succeed, but not everything you needed to be happy." The question clearly caught him off guard. For a moment, the composed billionaire facade cracked, revealing something raw underneath. "Happiness wasn't considered a priority," he said quietly. "Security was. Power was. Success was. But happiness," he shrugged, "that was viewed as a luxury I couldn't afford. And now? Now I have more money than I can spend in 3 lifetimes, and I can't remember the last time I felt genuinely happy about anything." The honesty in his voice made Savannah's chest tighten. Here was a man who seemed to have everything, admitting he had nothing that really mattered. "When was the last time you did something just because it made you smile?" she asked. Elijah considered this seriously. "I honestly can't remember. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard." They sat in comfortable silence, the city lights twinkling beyond the windows like earthbound stars. Savannah found herself studying his profile, the way his jaw tightened when he was thinking, the shadows under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and heavy responsibilities. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally. "Anything. Why did you request me specifically? You could have asked for anyone." Elijah turned to face her fully. "Because in 38 years, you're the first person who looked at me and saw just me, not my money, not my influence, not what I could do for you. Just me." The words hit her like a physical force. She'd never considered that someone with his wealth and power might feel invisible in his own way. "That's not entirely true," she said softly. "What do you mean?" "I didn't just see you. I saw someone who looked like he needed a friend." When their eyes met this time, something shifted in the air between them. Not just attraction, though that was definitely present. Something deeper. Recognition. Like two people who'd been speaking different languages their entire lives, suddenly discovering they were fluent in the same one. Savannah's phone buzzed with a text from Keisha. "You better not be doing anything stupid up there." The reminder of reality made her stand quickly. "I should go." Elijah rose as well, but this time he didn't try to delay her departure. Instead, he walked her to the door with the same measured steps as the night before. "Savannah?" She turned back, hand on the doorknob. "Tomorrow, I'd like to try something different. Instead of room service." He paused as if the words were difficult to say. "Would you have dinner with me? As my guest, not my server." And in that moment, Savannah realized that some invitations don't just change an evening, they change everything. She stood at the crossroads between who she was and who she could become, and for once chose herself. Savannah stared at her meager closet, like it held the secrets of the universe. 3 work uniforms, 2 pairs of jeans, a black dress she'd worn to her high school graduation, and a handful of basic tops. Nothing remotely appropriate for dinner with a billionaire. "Girl, you're overthinking this," Keisha said from her perch on Savannah's twin bed, painting her nails a vibrant coral. The small studio apartment they shared felt even smaller, with the weight of Savannah's anxiety filling it. "Easy for you to say. You're not the one about to have dinner with someone who probably spends more on wine than we make in a month. So, you're not trying to impress him with your bank account. You already impressed him with your brain." Savannah pulled out the black dress. Simple, modest, but well-fitted. It would have to do. "Keisha, what if I'm making a huge mistake? Mr. Hartwell already thinks I'm in over my head. If this goes wrong..." "Baby girl." Keisha capped her nail polish and fixed Savannah with a serious look. "When's the last time you did something just for you? Not for your mama, not for the bills, not for anybody else, just for Savannah." The question hit harder than expected. Savannah couldn't remember the last time she'd made a choice, based purely on what she wanted. "That's what I thought," Keisha said gently. "Maybe it's time." 2 hours later, Savannah stood outside the presidential suite, wearing her black dress and the small pearl earrings her mother had given her for her 21st birthday. Her hands weren't shaking this time, but her heart felt like it might beat right out of her chest. She knocked, 3 soft taps that had become their unspoken signal. When Elijah opened the door, his reaction was immediate and unmistakable. His eyes widened slightly, then traveled from her face down to her dress and back up again, not in a way that felt objectifying, but in genuine appreciation. "You look..." He paused as if searching for words adequate to the moment. "Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Thank you." The compliment settled over her like warmth from a fireplace. "You clean up pretty well yourself." He'd traded his usual business attire for dark slacks and a midnight blue button-down that brought out the intensity in his eyes. He looked younger somehow, less burdened by the weight of his empire. "Please, come in," he said, stepping aside with a gesture that felt more like welcoming a friend than receiving a guest. The suite had been transformed. The dining table was set with hotel china, but simple flowers, white roses, served as centerpieces. Candles provided soft lighting instead of the harsh overhead fixtures. It felt intimate without being presumptuous, elegant without being intimidating. "You did all this?" Savannah asked, touched by the obvious effort. "I wanted tonight to feel different," Elijah said, pulling out her chair. Less formal, more real. As she sat, Savannah noticed there was no room service cart, no staff hovering in the background. "Where's dinner?" "I cooked." She turned to stare at him. "You cooked?" A hint of embarrassment colored his cheeks. "Don't look so surprised. I lived alone for years before I could afford staff. I'm not completely helpless. I just can't picture you in a kitchen." "Well, technically it's a kitchenette, and I may have ordered the ingredients from the hotel's executive chef, but I did the actual cooking." He disappeared into the suite's small kitchen area and returned with 2 plates. "Pasta primavera. Nothing fancy, but it's edible." The smell hit her first, garlic and herbs and something undeniably homemade. When she took the first bite, she couldn't hide her surprise. "This is actually really good." "You sound shocked." "I am shocked. A billionaire who can cook actual food. That's not exactly the stereotype." Elijah laughed, a real laugh, not the polite chuckle she'd heard him use with hotel staff. "I'm full of surprises." As they ate, Conversation flowed easier than it had any right to. They talked about books. Savannah was surprised to learn he'd read everything from Toni Morrison to Gabriel Garcia Marquez. They discussed travel, though their perspectives couldn't have been more different. "I've been to 43 countries," Elijah said, refilling their wine glasses. "Business trips mostly. Board meetings in Geneva, negotiations in Tokyo, acquisitions in São Paulo. But I realized recently that I couldn't tell you what any of those places actually felt like. Just the insides of boardrooms and five-star hotels. I've never been outside New York State," Savannah admitted, "but I've spent hours reading travel blogs and watching documentaries. Sometimes I feel like I know more about places I've never been than you do about places you have. Tell me about somewhere you want to go." "Morocco." The answer came without hesitation. "I want to walk through the markets in Marrakesh, smell the spices, hear all those languages mixing together. I want to drink mint tea and watch the sunset over the Atlas Mountains." The longing in her voice was so pure that Elijah found himself imagining it with her, seeing those markets through her eyes, experiencing wonder instead of just checking locations off a business itinerary. "What's stopping you?" "Money, time, reality." She shrugged. "Plane tickets to Morocco cost more than I make in 3 months, and even if I could afford it, I can't leave my mum for that long." "Tell me more about her," Elijah said softly. Savannah found herself sharing stories she rarely told anyone, how her mother, Diane, had worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat after Savannah's father left when she was 8. How Diane had never remarried, claiming she had everything she needed in her daughter. How even now, facing daily pain and mounting medical bills, Diane never complained. "She still asks about my day every night," Savannah said, twirling pasta around her fork. "Wants to know if anything interesting happened, if I met anyone nice. I never know what to tell her." "What will you tell her about tonight?" The question caught her off guard. "I don't know. Part of me feels like this is too good to be real. Like I'm going to wake up and find out it was all a dream." "It's real," Elijah said quietly. "This feeling, this connection, it's the most real thing I've experienced in years." Their eyes met across the small table, and Savannah felt that now familiar electric current run through her. But tonight, instead of frightening her, it felt like coming home. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "And I want you to be completely honest. Always. What do you want from me?" "Really?" Elijah set down his wine glass and considered the question seriously. "I want to know what it feels like to be with someone who sees me, not my portfolio. I want to remember what it's like to laugh without calculating the business advantage. I want to feel like a human being instead of a corporation. And what do I get out of this arrangement?" "I don't know," he said honestly. "What do you want?" Savannah had never been asked that question so directly. What did she want? Not need, not should want, but actually want for herself. "I want to feel like I matter," she said finally. "Not just as someone's daughter or someone's employee, but as myself. I want to have conversations that challenge me. I want to feel beautiful and smart and interesting, not just useful." "You are all those things," Elijah said with quiet intensity. "Beautiful and smart and interesting and so much more. How can you know that? You barely know me." "I know enough." He reached across the table and touched her hand gently. "I know you read Baldwin in your spare time. I know you worry about your mother more than yourself. I know you're brave enough to have honest conversations with strangers. I know you make me want to be better than I am." The touch of his hand sent warmth up her arm and straight to her heart. This was dangerous territory, she knew, but for the first time in her life, danger felt like possibility. "Elijah," she said softly, "what happens tomorrow? What happens when you go back to your world and I go back to mine?" "I don't know," he admitted, "but I know I don't want tonight to end." They finished dinner as the city lights began to twinkle beyond the windows. When Elijah suggested they move to the living area, Savannah found herself settling onto the sofa beside him, instead of in the separate chair she'd occupied the previous nights. "Tell me something about yourself that you've never told anyone," she said. Elijah was quiet for so long, she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Sometimes I sit in board meetings with the most powerful people in the world, and I feel completely alone, like I'm watching my life happen to someone else." The vulnerability in his confession made her chest ache. Without thinking, she reached for his hand. "You're not alone right now," she said simply. When he looked at her, his eyes held something she'd never seen before. Hope mixed with fear, desire tempered by uncertainty. "Savannah," he said her name like a prayer. "I need you to know something." "What?" "This isn't a game for me. You're not some temporary entertainment. What I feel when I'm with you," He paused, struggling with words that seemed too small for what he was trying to express. It's changing me. And as the night deepened around them, both Savannah and Elijah realized they were standing on the edge of something that could either save them both or destroy everything they thought they knew about themselves. The most dangerous words aren't "I love you," they're "I've never felt this before." The morning after their dinner, Savannah moved through her hotel duties like someone walking underwater. Every mundane task, restocking towels, delivering breakfast trays, checking inventory, felt surreal after the intimacy of the previous evening. She kept replaying Elijah's words, "It's changing me." What had he meant? And more importantly, what was she supposed to do with the way her heart had nearly stopped when he'd said it? "You're glowing," Keisha observed during their lunch break in the hotel's employee cafeteria. "Like, actually glowing. Should I be worried?" "Nothing happened," Savannah said quickly, stabbing at her salad. "Uh-huh. That's why you've been smiling at napkins all morning." Keisha leaned closer. "Spill. Now." Before Savannah could deflect, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Good morning, I hope you slept better than I did." Her heart did that fluttering thing again, and Keisha's eyebrows shot up. "Oh, honey, you're in deep." "It's complicated," Savannah murmured, typing back, "Good morning. Long night?" His response came immediately. "Couldn't stop thinking about our conversation. About you." "Are we still on for tonight?" They'd tentatively planned another evening together, but in the harsh light of day, with the reality of their different worlds pressing down on her, Savannah felt the familiar weight of doubt. "Yes," she typed, then immediately questioned whether she was making the right choice. That evening, when she arrived at the presidential suite, Elijah was waiting by the window, silhouetted against the Manhattan skyline. He turned when she entered, and the relief on his face was so evident it made her stomach flip. "I was afraid you might change your mind," he said, crossing the room to greet her. "I thought about it," she admitted honestly. "What made you come?" "Curiosity, I guess. I want to understand what this is. This? Whatever's happening between us, because it feels bigger than just conversation." Elijah gestured toward the seating area, but tonight felt different from the start. The air between them was charged with unspoken possibilities and unasked questions. "I've been thinking about that too," he said, settling beside her on the sofa, closer than before, but still respectfully distant. "Can I tell you something?" "Always." "In the past 72 hours, you've made me question everything I thought I knew about my life." "How so?" "Yesterday, I had a video conference with my board of directors, 15 of the most successful people in international business, discussing a merger that could add another billion to our portfolio." He paused, running a hand through his hair. "And all I could think about was whether you'd enjoyed the pasta I made." Savannah felt heat rise in her cheeks. "That seems like poor business focus." "Terrible business focus," he agreed with a slight smile. "But for the first time in my adult life, something mattered more than business." The weight of his words settled between them. Savannah understood what he was saying, and what he wasn't saying yet. "Elijah," she said carefully, "I need you to understand something about my life. I don't have the luxury of making choices based purely on emotion. Every decision I make affects my mother, our bills, our future. I can't afford to get swept up in something that might not be real. What would make it real for you?" The question was so direct, it caught her off guard. "I don't know. Time, I guess, consistency, proof that this isn't just novelty for you." "Novelty? Come on, Elijah. I'm not naive. A man like you, with your resources, your options, when's the last time you spent time with someone like me? Someone who takes the subway home and splits groceries with her roommate." Instead of being offended, Elijah considered her words seriously. "You're right. I haven't. But not for the reasons you might think." "What do you mean?" "I haven't spent time with anyone like you because I haven't spent real time with anyone, period. My relationships, if you can call them that, have been strategic, networking disguised as dating, women who understood that our connection was transactional. And that worked for you." "I thought it did. It was efficient, uncomplicated. No one expected emotional investment I couldn't give. But now?" Elijah turned to face her fully, his eyes holding an intensity that made her breath catch. "Now I'm sitting here with someone who makes me want to invest everything." The confession hung in the air like a challenge. Savannah felt the familiar urge to run, to retreat to the safety of her small, predictable world, but something stronger kept her anchored to the moment. "That's terrifying," she whispered. "Why?" "Because I feel the same way, and I don't know what to do with that." The admission surprised them both. Savannah had intended to maintain some emotional distance, to protect herself from potential heartbreak. Instead, she'd revealed the truth she'd been hiding even from herself. "Savannah." Elijah's voice was soft but urgent. "Look at me." When she met his eyes, he continued, "I know this is complicated. I know we come from different worlds. But what if that doesn't matter as much as we think it does? How can it not matter? Your life, your responsibilities, can coexist with this, with us. Is there an us? I'd like there to be." The simple statement carried the weight of possibility and promise. Savannah found herself studying his face, looking for any sign of insincerity or casual interest. She found neither. "What would that look like?" she asked. "I don't know exactly, but I know I want to find out." They sat in silence for a moment, the city humming quietly beyond the windows. Finally, Savannah spoke. "Can I tell you something that might sound crazy? Please. 3 days ago, I thought I knew exactly what my life would look like. Work, save money, take care of my mom, maybe eventually take a few community college classes. Simple, predictable." She paused. "Now I feel like I'm standing at the edge of something completely unknown, and part of me wants to jump." "What's the other part saying? That I'm not the kind of person who gets to have fairy tale moments, that this will end badly and I'll be left worse off than when I started." Elijah shifted closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his eyes. "What if it doesn't end badly? What if it's just the beginning? You can't promise that." "No, I can't. But I can promise that whatever happens, I'll be honest with you. I'll respect you. And I'll never make you feel like you're anything less than extraordinary." The sincerity in his voice made her eyes burn with unshed tears. "Why me, Elijah? Really? Out of all the people you could have, because you're the first person who's ever made me want to be myself instead of who I'm supposed to be." Before she could overthink it, Savannah reached for his hand. The contact sent warmth shooting up her arm, but this time she didn't pull away. "I'm scared," she admitted. "So am I." "What are you scared of? That I'll disappoint you? That I won't know how to be what you need? That you'll realize I'm not worth the risk?" His vulnerability undid something inside her chest. Here was one of the most powerful men in the world, admitting his fears with the honesty of a child. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Anything. When you said this was your first time feeling something real, what did you mean?" Elijah was quiet for so long, she wondered if she'd pushed too far. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "I mean, I've never felt protective of someone's happiness before. I've never wanted to know everything about another person's thoughts and dreams and fears. I've never looked forward to seeing someone the way I look forward to seeing you." He paused, then continued with devastating honesty. "I've never wanted to be worthy of someone before." And in that moment, Savannah realized that some confessions don't just change how you feel about someone. They change who you're willing to become. Sometimes the bravest thing you can say isn't, "I love you." It's, "I trust you with who I really am." The next evening arrived with an unusual request. Instead of their customary meeting in the presidential suite, Elijah had asked Savannah to meet him in the hotel's rooftop garden, a space typically reserved for private events and VIP gatherings. As she took the service elevator to the top floor, her palms were damp with nervous anticipation. The rooftop was transformed into something from a dream. String lights created constellations against the darkening sky, and a small table was set with simple elegance near the garden's edge. The Manhattan skyline stretched endlessly before them, but what took Savannah's breath away wasn't the view. It was the look on Elijah's face when he saw her. "You came," he said, as if he genuinely doubted she would. "You asked me to." She approached slowly, still processing the effort he'd put into creating this moment. "This is beautiful, Elijah, but won't people ask questions? Staff talk. Let them." His response was firm, almost defiant. "I'm tired of hiding what matters to me." The declaration sent a flutter through her chest. "What if your business associates find out? Won't this affect your reputation?" "My reputation is built on making smart investments," he said, pulling out her chair. "You're the smartest investment I've ever considered." As they settled at the table, Savannah noticed he seemed different tonight, more resolved, as if he'd made some internal decision that had shifted everything. "You're nervous," she observed. "Terrified," he corrected with a slight smile. "I have something I want to tell you, and I'm not sure how you'll react." "Try me." Elijah poured wine for both of them, his movements careful and deliberate. "Yesterday, after you left, I called my assistant and cleared my schedule for the next 2 weeks. 2 weeks, that seems extreme for someone who runs a global empire. I also cancelled a merger meeting in London, postponed an acquisition in Singapore, and turned down 3 board positions. that would have been considered career-defining opportunities. Savannah stared at him. Why would you do that? Because I realized something. He met her eyes directly. I've spent 15 years building an empire, and I've never once stopped to ask myself what I actually wanted. I've never made a choice based purely on what would make me happy. And what would make you happy? Time. Real time. With you. The simplicity of his answer made her chest tight. Elijah, you can't just upend your entire life for someone you've known for 4 days. Can't I? He leaned forward slightly. Savannah, in 4 days you've made me feel more alive than I have in 4 years. You've made me want to be someone worthy of your time, your thoughts, your trust. But what about your responsibilities, your company? We'll survive 2 weeks without me micromanaging every decision. I have excellent people in place. It's time I trusted them to do their jobs while I figure out how to live mine. The weight of what he was saying, the sacrifice he was willing to make, felt overwhelming. I don't know what to say. Say you'll spend some of that time with me. Not here, not in controlled environments where you're working and I'm a client. Just us. Figuring out what this is. What exactly are you proposing? Simple things, coffee in the morning, walks in Central Park. Maybe you could show me your neighborhood, your world. I want to understand where you come from, what shaped you. The idea of Elijah March in her modest Queens neighborhood was almost surreal, but something about his earnestness made it feel possible. My world isn't glamorous, she warned. It's subway rides and corner bodegas and laundromats that smell like bleach. It's your world. That makes it interesting to me. They ate dinner as the city lights began to twinkle below them. Conversation flowed easier than ever, touching on everything from childhood memories to dreams they'd never spoken aloud. But as the evening progressed, Savannah sensed an undercurrent of something unsaid. There's something else, isn't there? She asked finally. Elijah set down his wine glass, his expression growing serious. There is, and it's probably going to sound crazy. More crazy than clearing your schedule for 2 weeks? Much more crazy. He took a breath. I want to tell you something I've never told anyone about intimacy. The word hung between them, loaded with implication. Savannah felt heat rise in her cheeks but maintained eye contact. Okay. You mentioned the other night that you'd never been alone with a man in a suite like mine, that it was a first for you. It was. Well, this, he gestured between them. This emotional connection, this feeling of actually caring about someone's inner world, this is a first for me, too. Savannah studied his face, trying to understand what he wasn't saying directly. What do you mean? I mean, I've had relationships, if you can call them that, physical encounters, arrangements that served mutual purposes, but I've never felt invested in someone's happiness before. I've never wanted to protect someone's heart. The vulnerability in his confession made her own heart race. Elijah, I need you to understand something, he continued, his voice soft but intense. When I'm with you, everything feels new. The way you look at me, the way you listen, the way you challenge my assumptions about myself. It's like experiencing intimacy for the first time. Emotional intimacy, she clarified, her voice barely above a whisper, the only kind that matters. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of mutual confession settling between them. Finally, Savannah spoke. I told you before that I'd never been with anyone, that this was all new territory for me. I remember. What I didn't tell you is why. She took a steadying breath. It wasn't just circumstance or lack of opportunity. It was choice. I was waiting. For what? For someone who would see me as more than just available. Someone who would care about my thoughts as much as my body. Someone who would make me feel safe enough to be completely honest. Elijah's eyes never left her face. And now? Now, I'm sitting across from someone who makes me want to stop waiting. The admission surprised them both. Savannah had intended to maintain some emotional distance, but the truth had a way of emerging despite her best intentions. Savannah, Elijah said carefully, I need you to know that whatever happens between us, there's no pressure, no expectations. I'm not asking for anything except the chance to keep knowing you. What if I want to give you more than that? The question hung in the air like a promise and a challenge. Elijah reached across the table and touched her hand gently. Then we take it as slowly as you need, because this, he intertwined their fingers, this matters more than any timeline or expectation. You know what's funny, Savannah said, looking down at their joined hands. What? I spent my whole life thinking I was waiting for the right person. Turns out I was waiting for the right feeling. What feeling is that? Safety, trust, the feeling that someone sees all of me and still wants to stay. Elijah lifted their joined hands and pressed a soft kiss to her knuckles. The gesture was so tender, so reverent, that it made her eyes burn with unshed tears. "I see you," he said simply, "and I'm not going anywhere." As the night deepened around them, with the city sprawling endlessly below and stars barely visible beyond the light pollution, both Savannah and Elijah realized they were no longer just falling for each other. They were choosing each other. And sometimes the most profound intimacy happens when two people finally feel safe enough to stop pretending they don't need love after all. The moment she brought him home, she realized some bridges can't be uncrossed. Savannah stood outside the modest brick building in Astoria, Queens, watching Elijah emerge from a sleek black car that looked wildly out of place among the double-parked Hondas and aging pickup trucks. He'd insisted on experiencing her world, and she'd finally agreed to let him meet her mother, a decision that had kept her awake most of the night. "You sure about this?" she asked as he approached, noting how his expensive casual wear still screamed wealth despite his obvious efforts to dress down. "Nervous," he admitted, "but sure." The three-story walk-up had seen better decades. Paint peeled from the entrance door, and the intercom system had been broken for as long as Savannah could remember. As they climbed to the second floor, she found herself seeing the worn carpet and flickering hallway lights through his eyes. "Savannah, honey, is that you?" Her mother's voice called from behind the apartment door before they could knock. "It's me, Mama." Savannah used her key, then paused in the doorway. "I brought someone I'd like you to meet." Diane Quinn was seated in her favorite armchair, a crocheted blanket across her lap despite the warm evening. At 52, diabetes had aged her beyond her years, but her eyes remained sharp and kind. When Elijah entered behind Savannah, those eyes widened with surprise and something that might have been concern. "Mama, this is Elijah." "Elijah, my mother, Diane." Elijah stepped forward with genuine warmth, extending his hand. "Mrs. Quinn, it's an honor to meet you. Savannah speaks about you constantly." "Does she now?" Diane shook his hand, studying his face with the intensity of a mother protecting her child. "And what exactly is your relationship with my daughter, Elijah?" "Mama," Savannah protested, heat rising in her cheeks. "It's all right," Elijah said gently. "Mrs. Quinn, I care about Savannah very much. She's extraordinary." "That she is." Diane gestured toward the small sofa. "Sit down, both of you. I'll make some tea." "I'll get it," Savannah said quickly, but her mother waved her off. "I may be sick, but I'm not dead. Besides, I want to talk to this young man." As Diane made her careful way to the kitchenette, Savannah shot Elijah an apologetic look. He seemed genuinely fascinated by the small apartment, the family photos covering one wall, the stack of library books on the coffee table, the well-worn furniture that spoke of comfort rather than style. "Your daughter mentioned you're in business," Diane called from the kitchen. "Yes, ma'am. International development." "That sounds fancy." "What kind of development?" Elijah glanced at Savannah, who shrugged with a look that said, "You wanted the real experience." "Commercial real estate mostly. Hotels, office buildings, some residential projects." "And you met my Savannah at that fancy hotel where she works." "I did." Diane returned with 3 mismatched mugs of tea, moving slowly but deliberately. "Must be nice, staying in places like that." "It is," Elijah said honestly, "though I'm learning there are different kinds of wealth." "Oh? What kind would that be?" "The kind your daughter has. Genuine warmth, integrity, the ability to find joy in simple things." Diane settled back into her chair, studying Elijah with new interest. "You talk like a man who's been missing those things." "I have been." The simple admission seemed to surprise Diane. She sipped her tea thoughtfully before speaking again. "Savannah tells me you've been spending time together." "Mama," Savannah started. "We have," Elijah confirmed. "She's become very important to me." "Important how?" Elijah set down his mug and leaned forward slightly. "Mrs. Quinn, I know this might sound strange, but your daughter has changed how I see everything. My work, my priorities, what actually matters in life. That's a heavy burden to put on someone you just met." "Mama," Savannah said, more firmly this time. "No, she's right," Elijah said. "It is a heavy burden, but I'm not asking Savannah to fix me or complete me. I'm asking for the chance to be worthy of her time." Diane was quiet for a long moment, watching the interplay between her daughter and this unexpected guest. Finally, she spoke. "Savannah's father said pretty words too." The room went silent. Savannah's face paled, and Elijah felt the weight of family history he didn't fully understand. "Mama, that's not fair, isn't it?" Diane's voice was gentle but firm. Baby girl, you've worked so hard to build a stable life. Don't let pretty words and fancy gestures make you forget who you are. I would never ask her to forget who she is, Elijah said quietly. Who she is why I'm here. And who are you? Diane asked directly. Really? Elijah considered the question seriously. I'm someone who has spent most of his life achieving things that looked impressive on paper, but felt empty in practice. I'm someone who thought success meant control, distance, self-sufficiency. He paused. And I'm someone who's learning that was wrong. What's right then? Connection, honesty, caring about someone else's happiness as much as your own. Diane leaned back in her chair, still studying him. You have money. It wasn't a question. Yes. Lot of money? Yes. And what do you think that means for someone like my daughter? Savannah stood up abruptly. Okay, this is ridiculous. Mama, you're treating him like he's some kind of predator. Sit down, baby. Diane's voice was calm but commanding. I'm not done. Reluctantly, Savannah sat back down, though her posture remained tense. Mr. Elijah, Diane continued, I've raised my daughter to be independent, to rely on herself, to never let anyone make her feel small. What happens when the novelty wears off? When you get bored with playing house with the help? Mama! Savannah's voice was sharp with hurt and embarrassment. But Elijah didn't look offended. Instead, he looked thoughtful. Mrs. Quinn, can I tell you something about your daughter? Go ahead. She's the strongest person I've ever met. She works 2 jobs, takes care of you, manages household finances, and still finds time to read literature and dream about traveling the world. She has more dignity and grace than people I know who are born with every advantage. I know what my daughter is worth. Do you know that she thinks she's not good enough? That she believes she doesn't deserve beautiful things or experiences because she didn't grow up with them? Diane's expression softened slightly. That's not what I taught her. No, but it's what the world taught her. And if I've learned anything in the past week, it's that your daughter deserves everything beautiful this world has to offer, and you think you're the one to give it to her. I think I'd like the chance to try. Not because she needs me to, but because I need to learn what it means to give, without expecting anything in return. The room fell quiet again. Savannah looked between her mother and Elijah, feeling like she was watching a negotiation for her future. Finally, Diane spoke. Savannah, go get me some water from the kitchen. Mama, I'm not leaving you alone with... Go. Reluctantly, Savannah headed to the kitchen, though she positioned herself where she could still hear the conversation. Listen to me carefully, Diane said, her voice low but carrying. That girl is my whole world. She's sacrificed her youth, her education, her dreams to take care of me. If you hurt her, if you make her feel foolish for caring about you, if you treat her like some kind of charity case or exotic experiment, I will make your life very, very difficult. I understand. Do you? Because I may not have money or influence, but I have community. I have people who love my daughter and would do anything to protect her. Mrs. Quinn, Elijah said seriously, I would do anything to protect her too. Even from yourself? The question hit him like a physical blow. What do you mean? I mean, sometimes the biggest threat to people like Savannah isn't malice. It's good intentions from people who don't understand the consequences of their choices. When Savannah returned with the water, she found them sitting in contemplative silence. Everything okay? She asked. We understand each other, Diane said simply. As they prepared to leave an hour later, Diane pulled Savannah aside. Baby, he's not what I expected. Good or bad? Good, I think. But be careful. Men like that live in a different world. Make sure you don't lose yourself trying to fit into it. And as they walked back into the night, both Savannah and Elijah realized that love isn't just about 2 people. It's about the worlds they're willing to bridge for each other. Sometimes the hardest battles aren't against the world. They're against your own heart, when it wants something you're afraid to believe you deserve. The call came at 6:47 a.m., jolting Savannah from the first peaceful sleep she'd had in weeks. Keisha's voice was tight with urgency. Girl, you need to get to work. Now. What's wrong? Just get here. And Savannah, whatever's been going on with you and that billionaire, it's not a secret anymore. Savannah's blood turned to ice. She threw on her uniform and took the subway into Manhattan, her mind racing through every possible scenario. Had someone seen them together? Had Elijah's request for her specifically raised red flags? Had their evening on the rooftop been witnessed? The hotel lobby felt different when she arrived, charged with whispered conversations that stopped when she passed. Staff members who usually smiled and nodded now averted their eyes. The weight of scrutiny pressed down on her shoulders like a physical force. Mr. Hartwell was waiting in his office, his expression grim. Beside him sat a woman Savannah didn't recognize, tall, blonde, immaculately dressed in a way that screamed old money and older power. "Quinn, sit down," Hartwell said without preamble. "Is everything all right, sir?" "This is Catherine Westfield," Hartwell said, gesturing to the woman. "She represents certain interests related to Mr. March's stay with us." Catherine Westfield studied Savannah with the cold efficiency of someone accustomed to evaluating threats. "Miss Quinn, I understand you've been providing personal services to Mr. March during his extended stay." "Room service," Savannah corrected carefully. "I've been handling his room service requests." "Room service that includes extended conversations, private dinners, off-site meetings." The questions hit like accusations. Savannah felt heat rise in her face, but kept her voice steady. "Mr. March requested my services specifically. I was following hotel protocol. Protocol doesn't typically include accompanying guests to rooftop venues after hours," Catherine said, consulting a tablet, "or accepting rides in private vehicles to residential addresses in Queens." Savannah's stomach dropped. They'd been watching, documenting, building a case for... "What? I don't understand what I'm being accused of," she said. "Nothing yet," Catherine replied smoothly. "But Mr. March is a very important client with significant business interests that could be compromised by inappropriate associations." "Inappropriate how?" Catherine's smile was sharp as winter. "Come now, Miss Quinn. You're an intelligent young woman. Surely you understand that men in Mr. March's position are often targeted by individuals seeking to improve their circumstances through personal relationships." The accusation hit Savannah like a slap. "You think I'm some kind of gold digger. I think you're a young woman who works 2 jobs to support herself and her sick mother. I think you found yourself in a situation that might seem like an opportunity, and I think it would be wise for everyone involved if that situation were clarified. What exactly are you asking me to do? End whatever personal relationship has developed. Return to strictly professional interactions. Accept a transfer to our Chicago property, with a promotion and salary increase, of course, to remove any temptation for continued inappropriate contact." Savannah stared at the woman in disbelief. "You're trying to buy me off. I'm offering you a career opportunity while protecting Mr. March from potential complications. Does he know about this meeting?" "Mr. March's calendar is managed by his professional team. His personal associations are managed by people like me." The casual dismissal of Elijah's autonomy made Savannah's blood boil. "And if I refuse?" Catherine's expression hardened slightly. "Then we'll have to consider other options. Hotel employment requires discretion, particularly when it comes to guest relationships. Violations of that discretion can result in immediate termination and difficulty finding similar employment elsewhere." The threat was clear. Savannah looked at Mr. Hartwell, hoping for some sign of support, but his face remained carefully neutral. "I need time to think," Savannah said finally. "You have until tomorrow morning," Catherine replied, standing. "I trust you'll make the right decision." After they left, Savannah sat alone in the small office, her hands shaking with anger and fear. The fairy tale she'd begun to believe in was crumbling around her, revealing the harsh reality beneath. She made it through her shift on autopilot, avoiding the curious glances and whispered conversations of her co-workers. When her phone buzzed with a text from Elijah asking about dinner plans, she couldn't bring herself to respond. That evening, instead of going to the presidential suite, she took the subway home and sat in her mother's living room, staring at the wall. "Something's wrong," Diane observed from her chair. "Want to talk about it?" Savannah found herself pouring out the entire story, the meeting, the threats, the impossible choice she was being forced to make. Diane listened without interruption, her expression growing more serious with each detail. "Baby girl," Diane said when Savannah finished, "what do you want to do?" "I don't know. If I fight this, I could lose my job. If I take their offer, I lose Elijah. Either way, I lose." "What did your heart tell you before fear got involved? That what Elijah and I have is real, that it's worth fighting for. And now? Now I'm wondering if his business associates are right. Maybe I am just the help getting ideas above my station." Diane's voice was sharp. "Don't you dare let them make you feel small." "Mama, look around." Savannah gestured at their modest apartment. "This is my reality. Maybe trying to bridge his world and mine was always impossible. Or maybe that's exactly what makes it beautiful." Before Savannah could respond, there was a sharp knock at the door. They looked at each other in surprise. They rarely had unexpected visitors. Savannah opened the door to find Elijah standing in the hallway, his face tight with worry and anger. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. "How did you find out about Catherine Westfield's little meeting? Because I have sources too, and when someone threatens the woman I'm falling in love with, I hear about it." The words, "falling in love with," hit Savannah like lightning, but the anger in his voice overshadowed everything else. "You can't be here," she said, glancing nervously down the hallway. "If they find out, let them find out." Elijah stepped into the apartment, nodding respectfully to Diane. "Mrs. Quinn, I apologize for the intrusion." "No apology needed," Diane said, studying his face. "You look like a man with something to say." "I do." Elijah turned back to Savannah. "Did you think I wouldn't fight for you? Did you think I'd let them bully you into disappearing from my life? It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple." His voice was fierce with conviction. "Catherine Westfield works for my board of directors, not for me. She has no authority over my personal life, and she certainly has no right to threaten yours. She can get me fired, Elijah. She can make sure I never work in hospitality again. Then you'll work for me. As what? Your employee? That doesn't solve anything. It makes it worse. As my partner." The words rang through the small apartment like a bell. "As someone who helps me figure out how to build something meaningful instead of just profitable." Savannah stared at him. "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious about anything in my life." Diane cleared her throat softly. "Maybe you two should sit down and talk this through properly." As they settled on the small sofa, Elijah took Savannah's hands in his. "Listen to me," he said urgently. "I've spent the last 6 hours in meetings making it very clear to my board that my personal life is not subject to their management. I've also made it clear that anyone who threatens you is threatening me." "What did they say?" "That I'm making a mistake, that I'm thinking with my heart instead of my head, that someone like you could destroy everything I've built." Savannah felt her heart sink. Maybe they're right. No. His grip on her hands tightened. "They're wrong, because everything I've built feels meaningless without someone to share it with, someone who challenges me to be better, not just richer." "Elijah, I can't ask you to choose between me and your life's work. You're not asking. I'm choosing, and I'm choosing you." But as the weight of that choice settled over them both, Savannah realized that sometimes love isn't about whether two people want to be together. It's about whether they're brave enough to fight the whole world for that chance. Love doesn't ask you to choose between your heart and your head. It asks you to be brave enough to follow both. The emergency board meeting was called for 8 a.m. sharp. Elijah sat at the head of the polished conference table in his corporate headquarters, facing 12 of the most powerful business leaders in the country. The tension in the room was palpable, crackling like electricity before a storm. Catherine Westfield had clearly been busy overnight. A folder thick with photographs and documentation sat in front of each board member, evidence of his relationship with Savannah compiled like a prosecution case. "Elijah," began Harrison Blackstone, the board's senior member and Elijah's former mentor, "we need to discuss your recent personal choices." "My personal life isn't board business, Harrison. It is when it threatens the stability of our operations," interjected Margaret Chen, the razor-sharp CFO who'd never met a risk she wouldn't calculate. "These images show you compromising your professional judgment, fraternizing with hotel staff, taking her to residential meetings." "Her name is Savannah," Elijah said coldly, "and she's not a threat to anything except your narrow worldview." "She's a liability," Catherine said from her position at the far end of the table. "A hotel employee with financial pressures and family obligations. The potential for manipulation, blackmail, or public embarrassment is astronomical." "Manipulation?" Elijah's voice was dangerously quiet. "How you mean like this meeting? Like threatening her job to control my personal decisions?" The room fell silent. Several board members shifted uncomfortably. "Son," Harrison said, his voice taking on a paternal tone, "we understand this might seem romantic, but you have responsibilities. Shareholders, employees, global operations that depend on your judgment remaining clear. My judgment has never been clearer." "Really?" Margaret opened her folder and spread several photographs across the table. "Clear judgment includes being photographed entering a low-income apartment building in Queens, taking romantic dinners on hotel rooftops, where any paparazzi could document your liaison. Those aren't liaisons, they're dates, with someone I care about. Someone whose mother requires expensive medical care," Catherine added smoothly. "Someone whose financial situation could be dramatically improved by association with you." "How can you be certain her feelings are genuine?" "Because unlike everyone in this room, she's never asked me for anything." Yet, Margaret said pointedly. Elijah stood abruptly, his chair rolling back. I've heard enough. My relationship with Savannah Quinn is not up for board approval or committee review. If you have concerns about my professional performance, address those. But my personal life is off limits. It's not that simple, Harrison said gravely. We've received information that suggests this relationship could expose the company to significant financial and reputational risks. What information? Catherine activated a wall monitor, displaying what appeared to be financial records. Miss Quinn has significant debt, student loans, medical bills, credit card balances. The temptation to leverage her relationship with you for financial gain. Stop. Elijah's voice cut through the room like a blade. Just stop. You've investigated the woman I care about like she's a criminal. You've violated her privacy, threatened her livelihood, and now you're presenting her financial struggles as evidence of corruption. We're presenting reality, Margaret said firmly. She comes from a different world, Elijah, one where financial desperation can drive questionable decisions. The only questionable decisions I see are coming from this board. Elijah, Harrison's voice carried a warning. We're trying to protect you and protect the company. If you insist on continuing this relationship, we may have no choice but to consider more drastic measures, such as a vote of no confidence, temporary suspension of your CEO authority while you work through this personal crisis. The threat hung in the air like a sword. Elijah looked around the table at faces he'd known for years, people he'd considered allies, mentors, friends. Now they sat across from him like judges, ready to strip away everything he'd built because he'd fallen in love with the wrong person. You would destroy the company to control my personal life. We would protect the company from your poor judgment, Catherine said coldly. Elijah was quiet for a long moment, studying each face around the table. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm but carried an undertone of steel. Gentlemen, ladies, you seem to be operating under a fundamental misunderstanding, which is, you seem to think I need this company more than it needs me. Margaret's eyes narrowed. What are you saying? I'm saying that March Enterprises was built on my vision, my relationships, my reputation. I own 51% of this company, and I have binding contracts with every major client and partner we work with. Elijah, Harrison began. I'm not finished. Elijah's voice grew stronger. You can vote no confidence all you want. You can try to suspend my authority. But I can dissolve this board, restructure the company, and start fresh with people who understand that personal integrity isn't a liability. It's the foundation of everything we've built. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Catherine's face had gone pale. You wouldn't, Margaret said. Watch me. Elijah moved toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Catherine, if you or anyone representing this company approaches Savannah Quinn again, if you threaten her employment or attempt to interfere in her life in any way, I will sue you personally and professionally into oblivion. You're making a mistake, Harrison called as Elijah reached the door. No, Elijah said without turning around. I'm correcting one. An hour later, Elijah stood outside the modest brick building in Queens, his heart hammering against his ribs. He'd just essentially declared war on his own board of directors, risked everything he'd spent 15 years building, and possibly destroyed his professional reputation. And he'd never felt more certain of anything in his life. Savannah opened the door looking exhausted, her eyes red from crying. Elijah, what are you doing here? I thought we agreed it was too dangerous. I quit. What? Not quit, exactly. Restructured, reorganized, possibly started a small corporate war. He ran a hand through his hair. The details are complicated, but the important part is that no one can threaten you anymore. Savannah stared at him in shock. What did you do? What I should have done from the beginning. I chose you, completely, publicly, irrevocably. Elijah, no. Her voice was barely a whisper. You can't destroy your life for me. I'm not destroying anything. I'm finally building something that matters. But your company will survive, with or without that board, with or without Catherine Westfield's manipulation. He stepped closer, taking her hands. Savannah, I've realized something in the last 24 hours. What? I spent 15 years building an empire that felt empty because I was empty. I accumulated wealth and power and success, but I never had anything worth protecting, anyone worth fighting for. Tears spilled down her cheeks. You can't sacrifice everything for me. I'm not sacrificing anything. I'm investing in the only thing that's ever made me truly wealthy, which is love, real love, The kind that makes you brave enough to risk everything because you finally have something worth the risk. Savannah looked into his eyes, seeing not the calculated billionaire she'd first met, but a man who'd chosen vulnerability over safety, love over security. "What happens now?" she whispered. "Now we figure it out together. We build something new, something that honors who we both are, where we both come from, what we both value. And if we fail, then we fail together." "But Savannah," he cupped her face gently, "I don't think we're going to fail." And as she looked into his eyes, Savannah realized that sometimes the greatest acts of love aren't grand gestures. They're the quiet moments when someone chooses you over everything else they've ever known. Sometimes you have to lose everything you thought you wanted to find everything you actually need. 3 months later, Savannah stood in the empty office space overlooking Central Park, watching Elijah explain his vision to a small group of potential investors. Gone was the cold, calculating businessman she'd first encountered. In his place was someone passionate, animated, alive in a way she'd never seen before. "Traditional luxury hospitality treats guests like transactions," he was saying, gesturing toward the floor-to-ceiling windows. "We want to create something different, hotels that feel like communities, spaces where genuine human connection matters more than thread count." The investors, carefully chosen allies who'd followed Elijah away from March Enterprises, listened with growing interest. Savannah smiled, remembering how nervous he'd been that morning, asking her opinion on everything from the presentation order to his choice of tie. "And your market research supports this approach?" asked Rebecca Martinez, a sharp-eyed venture capitalist who'd built her reputation on spotting trends before they became obvious. "Our research suggests there's a significant gap in the market," Savannah said, stepping forward with the confidence she'd developed over months of working alongside Elijah. "Travelers, particularly younger demographics, are seeking authentic experiences over generic luxury." The transition from hotel employee to business partner hadn't been without challenges. Savannah had insisted on earning her position rather than simply being appointed to it. She'd spent countless hours studying market analysis, hospitality trends, and business development, often staying up until 2 a.m. reading reports, while Elijah worked beside her at her tiny kitchen table. "Miss Quinn raises an excellent point," said David Kim, another potential investor. "But can you execute this vision profitably?" Elijah and Savannah exchanged a look, the wordless communication they'd developed over months of late-night planning sessions and shared dreams. "Our first property opens in 6 months," Elijah said. "A boutique hotel in Charleston that we're converting from a historic mansion. Every room tells a story about the local community. Every meal features ingredients from regional farmers. Every staff member is trained not just in service but in genuine hospitality." "And the numbers?" Rebecca pressed. Savannah activated the presentation screen, displaying projections they'd spent weeks perfecting. "Conservative estimates show profitability within 18 months, but more importantly, guest satisfaction surveys from our test focus groups show unprecedented loyalty scores." As the meeting continued, Savannah felt a familiar flutter of pride mixed with disbelief. 6 months ago, she'd been delivering room service and worrying about medical bills. Now she was co-presenting business plans to millionaire investors, wearing a dress she'd bought with her first real paycheck from Quinn March Hospitality. The company name had been Elijah's idea, though Savannah had argued against it for weeks. "My name doesn't belong on a multi-million-dollar company," she'd protested. "Yes, it does," he'd replied simply, "because this company wouldn't exist without your vision of what hospitality should feel like." After the investors left, with promises to review the proposal and preliminary commitments that had Elijah practically glowing, Savannah found herself alone with him in the space that would soon house their headquarters. "So?" he asked, loosening his tie with the relief of someone who'd just cleared a major hurdle. "So we might actually pull this off." "Might?" he grinned, pulling her into his arms. "Savannah Quinn, we're going to revolutionize an entire industry. Listen to you using we like you've been doing it all your life." "I have been. Just took me 38 years to find the right partner." The word partner still sent a thrill through her, not just because of its romantic implications, but because of how completely Elijah meant it. He'd insisted from the beginning that this be a true partnership, equal equity, equal decision-making power, equal respect for each other's strengths. "Speaking of partners," Savannah said, pulling back slightly, "I have news." "Good news or bad news?" "Good news. Great news, actually." She smiled, unable to contain her excitement. "I got the call this morning. Mama's been approved for the clinical trial. Elijah's face lit up with genuine joy. Savannah, that's incredible. The new diabetes treatment? The one you definitely didn't use your connections to help expedite, she said, with mock sternness. I would never, he replied with exaggerated innocence, though if certain research facilities happened to receive anonymous donations that helped fund their patient programs, that would be purely coincidental. Elijah March, you are incorrigible. And you love me anyway. The words hung between them like they always did. Not quite a question, not quite a statement. They'd been dancing around the actual declaration for months, both knowing how they felt but somehow afraid to make it official. I do, Savannah said simply. Love you, I mean. The admission came out so naturally it surprised them both. Elijah's eyes widened, then softened with an emotion so deep it made her breath catch. Say it again, he whispered. I love you. This time she said it with conviction, with certainty, with the weight of months of shared dreams and fought for moments. I love your ridiculous optimism about changing the world. I love how you listen to my ideas like they matter. I love that you've never once made me feel like I don't belong in your life. You don't belong in my life, Elijah said softly. Savannah's heart stopped for a moment, but then he continued. You are my life. You're the reason I wake up excited about the future, instead of just obligated to it. Before she could respond, he was kissing her. Not the careful, tentative kisses they'd shared before, but something deeper, more certain. A kiss that tasted like promises and felt like coming home. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Savannah rested her forehead against his. So what happens now? She asked. Now we build our hotel. We prove that business can have heart. We show the world that love isn't a weakness. It's the strongest foundation you can build on. And personally, Elijah pulled back to look at her fully. Personally, I want to take you to Morocco. What? You said you wanted to see the markets in Marrakesh, drink mint tea, watch the sunset over the Atlas Mountains. So let's go. Elijah, we can't just... Can't what? Take a vacation, celebrate our first successful investor meeting, show the woman I love the world she's been dreaming about. The casualness with which he said the woman I love made her heart do complicated things in her chest. When would we go? Next month. After we finalize the Charleston property purchase, but before construction begins. We'll have 2 weeks to explore, to celebrate, to just be together without business plans and conference calls and other people's opinions about our relationship. 2 weeks in Morocco. She said it like she was testing how the words felt. Just us. Just us. Well, us and whatever adventures we find. Savannah looked around the empty office space that would soon bustle with activity, then back at the man who'd turned her entire world upside down in the best possible way. Okay, she said. Okay to Morocco? Okay to all of it. The business, the trip, the future we're building together. She smiled, feeling lighter than she had in months. Okay to choosing love over fear. As the late afternoon sun painted golden stripes across the hardwood floors, Elijah spun her around the empty room, both of them laughing like children who'd just been told they could have dessert for dinner. And in that moment, surrounded by nothing but possibility and each other, they both realized that sometimes the most beautiful things aren't built with money or power. They're built with trust, hope, and the courage to dream together. In the end, love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone worth fighting for, worth changing for, worth choosing every single day. The Riad in Marrakech was everything Savannah had dreamed of and more. Ancient walls glowed golden in the morning light. The scent of jasmine and mint drifted through carved wooden screens, and the distant call to prayer mingled with the sounds of the awakening Medina. She stood on the rooftop terrace, watching the Atlas Mountains emerge from the dawn mist, feeling like she was living inside a story she'd only read about in books. You're up early, Elijah's voice came from behind her, warm with sleep and affection. She turned to find him approaching with 2 glasses of mint tea, his hair tousled, wearing the simple linen shirt he'd bought in the souks the day before. 2 weeks in Morocco had changed him, softened the sharp edges that years of corporate warfare had carved into his features. He looked younger, more at peace than she'd ever seen him. I couldn't sleep, she admitted, accepting the tea gratefully. I keep thinking I'm going to wake up and find out this is all a dream. What part? The trip? The business? Us? All of it. Especially us. They'd spent the past 2 weeks exploring markets and villages, riding camels across sand dunes, getting lost in the labyrinthine streets of the Medina. But more than that, they'd talked, really talked about everything. Their fears, their dreams, their individual plans for the future, and their shared vision of what they wanted to build together. "Can I tell you something?" Elijah said, settling beside her on the low wall that surrounded the terrace. "Always. When I was growing up, my grandfather used to say that successful men don't have time for love. That emotion was a luxury that would make me weak, distracted, vulnerable." He paused, watching the sun climb higher above the mountains. "I believed him for so long that I forgot to question whether I wanted to be that kind of successful. And now I know that everything I achieved before you was just accumulation. Money, properties, power. All of it meaningless because I had no one to share it with, no one whose happiness mattered more than my own." Savannah set down her tea and turned to face him fully. "Elijah, what are you saying?" Instead of answering with words, he stood and moved to face her, his expression serious but tender. From his pocket, he pulled out a small velvet box that made Savannah's heart stop beating entirely. "I'm saying that 6 months ago, I was a man who had everything and felt nothing, and now I'm a man who wants to spend the rest of his life making sure you know how extraordinary you are." "Elijah," her voice was barely a whisper, "I'm saying that I love you, Savannah Quinn, not just for who you are, but for who you've helped me become. Not just for how you make me feel, but for how you make me want to be better." He dropped to one knee on the ancient stones of the rooftop, the morning light painting everything golden around them. "I'm saying that I want to build a life with you, a real life, with roots and traditions, and Sunday morning coffee, and arguments about what color to paint the kitchen. I want to travel the world with you and come home to you. I want to be your partner in business and in everything else." Tears were streaming down Savannah's face, but she couldn't speak, could barely breathe. "Savannah," Elijah continued, his own voice thick with emotion, "will you marry me? Will you take this crazy leap with me and see what kind of beautiful life we can build together?" He opened the box to reveal a ring that was somehow perfect, not ostentatious or overwhelming, but elegant and timeless. A single diamond that caught the Moroccan sunlight and threw rainbows across the terrace stones. For a moment, Savannah was transported back to that first night in the hotel suite, when she'd been afraid to stay, afraid to trust, afraid to believe that someone like her could matter to someone like him. She thought about all the obstacles they'd overcome, all the people who'd told them it wouldn't work, all the moments when the smart choice would have been to walk away. And then she thought about the man kneeling in front of her, the one who'd risked his empire for her, who'd learned to cook pasta because it made her smile, who'd sat with her mother for hours discussing diabetes medications and treatment options, who'd made her dreams of travel and partnership and love into reality. "Yes," she said, the word coming out as barely more than a breath. "Yes?" Elijah's face broke into a grin that could have powered the entire city below them. "Yes, you impossible, wonderful man. Yes to all of it. Yes to the life, yes to the partnership, yes to choosing love over fear every single day." Elijah slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that trembled slightly, then stood and swept her into his arms, spinning her around as they both laughed and cried simultaneously. When he finally set her down, he kissed her with a passion that tasted like promises and felt like coming home. "I can't believe you proposed in Morocco," Savannah said when they finally broke apart, admiring the ring on her finger. "I can't believe you said yes. Did you really think I might say no? I hoped you'd say yes. But I knew that if you did, it would be because you really meant it. Because you're not the kind of person who says things she doesn't feel." They stood together on the rooftop, looking out over the city that was just beginning to fully wake up, and Savannah felt something settle in her chest, a sense of rightness, of completion, of having found her place in the world. "What happens when we go back?" she asked. "We plan a wedding, we open our hotel. We prove to everyone who doubted us that love doesn't make you weak, it makes you unstoppable. And personally? Personally, we learn what it means to be a family. We figure out how to merge your traditions with mine. We argue about whether to live in Manhattan or Queens or somewhere entirely new. We take care of your mother and build a life that honors where we both came from while embracing where we're going." "That sounds complicated." "The best things usually are." Savannah leaned into his warmth, watching the ancient city come to life below them. "Elijah?" "Yes?" "When you said this was your first time feeling real love, what did you mean exactly?" He was quiet for a moment, considering the question seriously. "I meant that everything before you was practice, rehearsal for the real thing. I thought I understood what love was, but I was just going through the motions. And now? Now I know that love isn't something you fall into. It's something you choose, every day, even when it's difficult, especially when it's difficult." And you choose me? Every day for the rest of my life, in Morocco and Manhattan and wherever else our adventures take us. As the sun climbed higher, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Savannah realized that some stories don't end with happily ever after. They end with happily ever beginning. Because the real adventure wasn't finding love, it was choosing to build a life worthy of that love, one day at a time. And as they stood together on that rooftop in Marrakesh, both Savannah and Elijah knew that their greatest adventure was just beginning. The adventure of choosing each other every single day for the rest of their lives. 2 years later, love doesn't end with I do. It begins there. The morning sun streamed through the windows of the Charleston mansion-turned-boutique hotel, casting long shadows across the restored hardwood floors. Savannah March, she still smiled every time she saw her married name on documents, stood in the lobby, watching their newest guests check in with the kind of wonder that never got old. Mrs. March, the young desk clerk, a local college student named Isaiah, approached with a tablet in hand. The food and beverage delivery is here, and the housekeeping staff wanted to confirm the room arrangements for the wedding party arriving this afternoon. Perfect timing, Savannah said, accepting the tablet to review the day's schedule. 2 years of running Quinn March Hospitality had taught her to juggle a dozen details simultaneously while still maintaining the personal touch that made their properties special. Their first hotel, Magnolia House Charleston, had exceeded every projection. Guest satisfaction scores consistently ranked in the top percentile nationally, and they'd been featured in 3 major travel magazines as the future of authentic luxury hospitality. More importantly, their staff turnover was nearly zero. Their community partnerships had revitalized the surrounding neighborhood, and their guests regularly wrote letters about how staying there had felt like being welcomed into family rather than just purchasing a service. "Any word from Mr. March?" Isaiah asked. "He's in meetings with the Atlanta property development team all morning, but he should be back by 3. Savannah glanced at her watch, just in time for the afternoon chaos. She moved through the hotel with the easy confidence of someone who'd found their calling. Every detail bore her touch, from the locally sourced breakfast menu to the reading nooks filled with books by Southern authors, to the community bulletin board highlighting neighborhood businesses and events. As she passed the parlor, she paused to watch an elderly couple sharing coffee and newspapers by the fireplace. They'd been married 53 years, they'd told her during check-in, and this was their first real vacation since retiring. The contentment on their faces as they sat together in comfortable silence made her heart full. "Excuse me, are you Savannah March?" She turned to find a young woman, maybe 22, with bright eyes and an eager expression. "I am. How can I help you?" "I'm Jessica Torres, hospitality management major at USC. I've read every article about your company, watched every interview. I was wondering—" She paused, suddenly nervous. "I know this is presumptuous, but I'm here with my family for the weekend, and I couldn't pass up the chance to ask, do you have any advice for someone starting out in the industry?" Savannah smiled, remembering her own nervous energy at that age, when every opportunity felt both thrilling and terrifying. "Want to walk with me while I check on preparations? We can talk." As they moved through the hotel together, Savannah found herself sharing lessons she'd learned not just about business, but about life, about the importance of listening more than you speak, about treating every person you encounter as someone with a story worth knowing, about the courage it takes to build something meaningful rather than just profitable. "The thing about hospitality," Savannah said as they reached the garden where that afternoon's wedding reception would take place, "is that it's really about creating space for people's important moments, not just providing a bed or a meal, but creating an environment where life happens." "That sounds almost sacred," Jessica said thoughtfully. "In a way, it is. We're part of people's anniversaries, their proposals, their family reunions, their quiet getaways when they need to remember who they are outside of their daily responsibilities." As if summoned by their conversation, a familiar voice called out across the garden, "There's my beautiful wife corrupting the youth with her idealistic business philosophy." Savannah turned to see Elijah approaching, his meeting apparently finished early. 2 years of marriage had only deepened the way her heart responded to his presence. Still that flutter of excitement, but now layered with the comfort of deep familiarity. "Jessica, I'd like you to meet my business partner and husband, Elijah March." "Elijah, Jessica is studying hospitality management and asking smart questions about the industry." "Ah, a future competitor." Elijah said with a grin, shaking Jessica's hand. In that case, definitely don't tell her about our 5-year expansion plan. He's joking, Savannah said, though Jessica looked momentarily panicked. We love competition. It keeps us honest. After Jessica left to rejoin her family, Elijah pulled Savannah into his arms right there in the garden, not caring who might see. How were the Atlanta meetings? She asked. Productive. The property is perfect, and the local partnerships are falling into place beautifully. But I spent the entire morning missing you. You saw me at breakfast 3 hours ago. 3 hours too long. She laughed, the sound carrying across the garden where their staff was setting up for the evening's wedding. You're ridiculous. Ridiculously in love with my wife. How was your morning? He asked, settling his hands at her waist. Busy. Good busy. I had a call with Mama. The clinical trial is going so well, her doctors are talking about reducing her medications. The new housekeeping manager is working out perfectly, and I just spent 20 minutes talking to a bright young woman who reminded me how much I love what we do here. Speaking of what we do here, Elijah said, his voice taking on a particular tone that she'd learned to recognize. Oh no, what are you scheming? Not scheming, proposing. A different kind of proposal than last time. I'm listening. What would you think about expanding beyond hotels? What do you mean? I mean, what if we created a foundation, something focused on hospitality education, entrepreneurship training for people from underserved communities, scholarships for first-generation college students pursuing careers in business? Savannah stared at him, her mind racing with possibilities. You want to create opportunities for people like me. I want to create opportunities for people with vision and heart who just need someone to believe in them, the way you made me believe in myself. The idea was so perfectly aligned with everything they'd built together that it took her breath away. We could call it the Quinn Foundation, she said slowly, in honor of the woman who taught me that dignity isn't about what you have, it's about how you treat people. Your mother would love that. She would. Savannah felt tears prick her eyes. Elijah, sometimes I can't believe this is our life. What do you mean? I mean, 2.5 years ago I was delivering room service and worrying about paying bills. Now we're talking about creating a foundation to help other people achieve their dreams. You were always capable of this, Savannah. You just needed the right opportunity. I needed the right partner. As the afternoon light shifted through the magnolia trees, casting dappled shadows across the garden, Savannah reflected on the journey that had brought them here. It hadn't always been easy, merging their different backgrounds, learning to navigate the complexities of running a business together, dealing with family expectations and public scrutiny. But every challenge had only strengthened their partnership, their trust in each other, their shared commitment to building something beautiful. Elijah, she said softly. Yes. Do you ever miss it? The old life, I mean. The simplicity of making decisions just for yourself. He considered the question seriously. Sometimes I miss the clarity of it, when success was just about numbers on a balance sheet. But I don't miss feeling empty. I don't miss going to bed every night wondering if anything I'd accomplished actually mattered. And now? Now I go to bed every night grateful. For you, for what we've built, for the chance to wake up tomorrow and choose you all over again. The wedding party began arriving, their laughter and excitement filling the garden with joyful energy. Savannah and Elijah stepped aside to let their staff work their magic, transforming the space into something worthy of the celebration to come. Ready for another evening of other people's happy endings? Elijah asked. They're not endings, Savannah corrected, watching a young bride-to-be direct the placement of centerpieces with the focused intensity of someone orchestrating her perfect day. They're beginnings, just like ours was. Just like ours is, Elijah agreed, every single day. As the sun began to set over Charleston, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold that rivaled any Moroccan sunset, Savannah and Elijah stood together in the garden of the hotel they'd built with love, surrounded by the life they'd chosen to create together. And in that moment, Savannah understood that the most beautiful love stories aren't about finding your Prince Charming or your fairy tale ending. They're about finding someone who makes you want to write a better story, day by day, choice by choice, for the rest of your life. The most profound love doesn't change who you are. It reveals who you've always been capable of becoming. Have you ever met someone who didn't just love you for who you are, but inspired you to become who you were meant to be? True love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone worth growing with, worth building dreams with, worth choosing every single day. Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, Leave a like and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.